Hello everyone, this is Tony. I'm also known as TP Holt on Board Game Geek, and today I'm here to give you a playthrough of the War of the Worlds, the USA East Coast version. Here is the game box, War of the Worlds USA East Coast version, and the reason I say it's the East Coast version is because there are actually 4 separate versions of this game, and they do have their differences. They are not the same game. It's published by Dan Versing Games. The designer is Arnold Della Ciega, and the artwork is by Nicholas Trial. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing those names. But here we are. We're going to play through the War of the Worlds, the East Coast version. This is the map for the USA East Coast version. One of the reasons I'm doing this video here today is because, to be perfectly honest, I'm not having a lot of success at this game up to this point. And so I would really like some pointers for you people out there that are watching this to say, hey, you missed that, or you could have done this, or you should have done that. And so I'm also really looking for some help and pointers here today. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining rules. Wayne Hansen has produced a most excellent playthrough of the England version of this game, and you can see that on YouTube and in the England version of the game's forums on Board Game Geek, and he goes into some detail on the rules. I'll go into some detail on the rules as well, but maybe not quite as much as he has. And on top of that, there are differences in the rules that make these games play very differently. And where I do see some differences or know of the differences, I'll try to point those out for you. Now, I've taken the liberty of mostly setting up the game to get ready to go. I've got all of the different producing regions with their production counters in place. I've placed the 3 assembly or handling machines in the 3 states. Red goes in Florida, green goes in Texas, yellow goes in Minnesota. I've also got the victory point and production counters in place. I've got the turn phase counter in place, and I've taken the liberty of setting up the 5 tripods in each of the first 2 waves. And that is one of the ways this game, version of the game, is different than the England game. In England, you start out with 1 wave of 4 tripods. The US version, you start out with 2 waves of 5 tripods. In addition, there are 6 additional freestanding tripods that will be their own waves that are also placed on the board at the beginning of the game. And that's where we're going to start, is by placing the tripod counters for the first and the second wave into the respective states, as well as the 6 individual tripods. And that's all done based on die rolls of these very normal 6-sided dice, but they are different colors instead of numbers. You have 3 green, 2 yellow, 1 red for each die. And where tripods are placed, where waves are placed, are based on the color that you roll. In addition, I have a player aid card that's going to have a lot of information on it. I know you can't maybe see all of it here. It's 3 pages. The England version is only 2 pages, but there are 3 pages here, and I'll be referring to that, and I may show that throughout the playthrough. Another thing to be aware of right away as far as a difference in the game, in England, the map is separated into different regions, as it is here in the United States. You've got red, you've got dark green, light green, red, orange, another lighter green, another red, and so on. And that's it for England. Each region is its own color, and it has 1 space per region. In the US version of the game, the different states are also part of different regions. For instance, in the dark green region here in the southwest of the eastern portion of the map, you have Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. In the US version of the game, each one of those states is a space that needs to be moved through by both human and Martian forces. And that also can cause some issues with the playing the game as far as strategies to employ. So those are the main differences off the top of my head and in startup. So let's get going. Let's place those waves. The first wave we'll roll, and we roll a yellow. So wave number 1, which are these 5 tripods here, goes in Minnesota. All right. Wave number 2 is green. Green, wave number 2, is going to go in Texas. And so we've got the 2 main waves already placed. Now we have these 6 individual tripods that need to go in place. And again, we roll the die and place them as appropriate. Green. So the first one also goes in Texas. Now these are separate waves, and with everything that means. Different rolls during the Devastation phase, which we'll see. Different rolls perhaps during the Martian action phase, which we'll see. Second tripod goes in red. That goes down in Florida. The third tripod, green again, back in Texas. So we now have 3 in Texas. Roll again, another one in Texas. So we now have 4 waves in Texas. Number 5, green again, also in Texas. And then the last wave, or tripod, is yellow, goes up in Minnesota. So taking a look at the setup of the game before we even really start, it's another way in which the games between England and the USA East Coast version differ. In the England version, you have 1 wave counter on the map. In the US version, you have 8. We have 2 in Minnesota, we have 5 in Texas, and we have 1 in Florida. And that can cause a lot of headaches and problems for the US player, or the individual player in the US version. Now, one more thing to do is that whichever way state has the number 1 region, we replace its production counter with a destroyed counter. So the Minnesota region starts out destroyed. That's significant. A destroyed region has no production. And on top of that, a destroyed region, you cannot place military units in a destroyed area. You can move already existing military units into a destroyed area, but you cannot place newly purchased units into a destroyed area. All right, so we're set up, we're ready to go. The first phase is the production phase, and the first part of that phase is you count up your production points. Here's another change from the England version, is the number of production points you start out with. You count up the actual individual gears on the individual production counters. They'll have 1, 2, 4, or 6 gears on them. And to start out, we have 4 more for 8, 6 for 14, 6 more for 20, 6 more for 26, 4 for 30, 4 more for 34, 2 for 36, 4 for 40, 2 more for 42. And so I take my production counters and I put 42 production points on the board to start the first turn. That seems like an awful lot. It's more than double what you get in the England game, and the prices for the units, for the most part, are not different. But it is worth noting that in conjunction with the number of states that units need to move through to get to where they need to be can cause problems. So with 42 points, well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be using one of the optional rules for the US version, and that's called Tesla technology. You see a marker here of Nikola Tesla, a very famous inventor of about the era that this game takes place in, early 20th, late 19th century. I am going to use the Tesla technology alternate rules because honestly, without it, I've had almost 0 success. So I'm going to use that, and the rules state place a Tesla counter in New York and cost 5 production points to do so. So that brings me down to 37 production points. Then I'm actually going to start researching my first Tesla technology. and that technology is going to be the EMP bomb. So I'm going to start that. It costs 2 points to research that technology. That brings me down to 35 production points. Now, in addition to researching the technology, you must have a breakthrough, however many Tesla counters are on the card, in this case just one for EMP bomb, and you roll for those breakthroughs with the dice. Now for EMP bombs, I need to roll a yellow for a breakthrough. Costs 2 more points to do that. I got a green. I did not achieve my breakthrough. Now, I can roll as many times as I want as long as I continue paying those production points in a given turn, but I can only have 1 success per turn, per production phase. So I'm actually going to roll 2 more points and try again. Another green, and I'm going to try 1 more time, which will bring me down to 29 production points. Yellow. All right. So I would take the counter, put it on the card, indicating that I have achieved the technology. I'm actually going to place this card up here because the EMP bomb has to do with the flying machine. And I'm also going to place the EMP bomb counter near the flying machine. What the EMP bomb does is that it makes it less likely that a flying machine piece, when it's called for by the rules, are placed. And the flying machine seems to be the bane of existence in the USA East Coast version. Completing all 4 pieces of the flying machine is a victory condition for the Martians. And so anything we can do to make that harder is a good thing. All right. So I'm left now with 29 production points in this first turn. I'm going to use 12 production points to buy a field gun. So I'm 12 points. I'm going to put it in a stand, and I'm going to place that in Michigan. The red regions are the most likely regions to produce flying machines, and so I want to whittle this region down as much as I possibly can, as early as I possibly can. I'm down to 17 points, so in addition to the field gun, I'm also going to buy an infantry unit. This infantry unit costs 10 points. I'm also going to place this in Michigan. So that brings me down to 7 production points. One other thing I'm going to do this turn is I'm going to buy a harbor, and you can see several spaces around the board have harbor icons. In the US version of the game, harbors cost 3 points, not 2. However, unlike the English version of the game, harbors are selectable instead of a random draw. And so I'm going to select Michigan as my harbor. And so I place the Michigan harbor counter in Michigan. I now have 4 production points remaining. Not good for buying anything else. I could buy another harbor, but 4 points also happens to be the amount needed to buy a warship, which is useful during naval battle scenarios. And it's possible we could have a naval battle scenario in this first turn. So I'm going to bank those 4 production points and leave them there. That is the end of my first production phase. We next move to the battle phase. Battles take place, whether on land or in naval forces, if there are human military forces and tripods in the same region. Here in this first turn, there are no Martian forces and human forces in the same state, so there will be no battle phase this turn. And so we move on to the next phase. Also, I should indicate there is a deck of action cards, event cards. I've got these put together, and you'll see the first one on top here says escape event. You draw an event card when you get to the phase that event card is for. We haven't gotten to that point yet. We will get to that point here in just a moment. The next phase is the Devastation phase, and this is the first phase where the Martians get to do some damage. The devastation phase, you roll once for each wave. And remember, all 8 of these counters are individual waves on the board. And so I could potentially roll 8 times on the devastation phase table, which is in the manual. It's also one of the options on this player aid card. However, you do not roll for devastation phases in any destroyed or red weed regions. So I won't roll for these 2, but I will roll for these 6. And so we'll start there. I'm going to start down here in Florida, rolling for this region. There is only 1 tripod in this region, so I will consult the 1 tripod line on the devastation phase table, and it's green. And 1 tripod, green, it's a heat ray used in Florida. That's -1 workforce. That's right here. Each workforce is a number. In Florida, it starts at 8. We'll flip that to 7. No change for the moment as far as that goes, as far as production or anything else goes, but it's 1 step closer to having a change. And in addition to that -1 workforce, there are 2 refugees created in Florida. So I'll take a refugee marker. This is the refugees marker. It's double-sided. It has 1 or 2. So we'll use the 2 side, and we'll put 2 refugees in Florida. That's the end of the devastation phase for the Florida tripod. Now I have 4 waves in Texas to roll for. First one I'm going to roll for is the wave number 2 counter, which again is represented by these 5 waves, but you only roll 1 time for all 5. That's green. There are 5 tripods in that wave. That's the heat ray. With 5 or more tripods, green heat ray, -1 unit. Well, that would indicate if I had any human units in Texas, I would have to lose 1, but I don't have any. A -5 workforce, which immediately takes Texas from 8 down to 3, and that does make a difference. It went from 2 gears down to 1. It also places 5 refugees, so we'll place 5 refugees in Texas. And we'll need 3 counters, 2 on their 2 side and 1 on its 1 side. In addition, we also would lose 1 human victory point if we had any. We do not have any. So that's the end of the devastation for that wave. But I still have 4, potentially 4 more rolls on the devastation phase table. So we're going to roll for this wave. It's a black tripod. It's got 1 in it. It's yellow. Yellow is black smoke. -3 workforce. Well, in conjunction with the number 2 wave, which already reduced it by 5, we reduced it by 3. As luck would have it, it only starts at 8. That's the end of the workforce in that region, and so it becomes destroyed, similar to Minnesota. Now, when a region becomes destroyed during the devastation phase, there are no more rolls, no more consequences. And so that's it. We could have rolled up to 5 times. We only had to roll twice. It's already gone. And you might think, hey, good for me. I get to forget 3 rolls on the devastation phase. And for the devastation phase, you're right. But when we get to the Martian action phase in a few minutes, you're going to see why that's not a good thing. That is, however, the end of the devastation phase. We don't roll up here because it's already destroyed. So that's the end of the devastation phase. And so we move on. The next phase is the human action phase. Again, our event card is an escape event, so there's no event card. Now I need to decide what to do with my human units, including the refugees. Here's another change between England and the United States versions of the game. In the England version of the game, because the map is only separated into colored regions, military units and refugees only move 1 turn or 1 region per turn. In the US version, because they're individual states, refugees, not military units, refugees can move up to 2 states per turn. And it's also important to keep in mind that at the end of the Martian action phase, actually, you need to have no more than the number of gears. And you can see here, for instance, the Kentucky-Tennessee region, I have 4 gears. I can only have that many refugees in a region. So I'm going to take 4 of my refugees from Texas, move them 2 states. And I'm trying to move them up to Michigan to get them to my harbor. So I go to Arkansas and Tennessee. So that's 4 refugees now in the Kentucky-Tennessee region. So that's it. I can't have any more refugees in the Kentucky or Tennessee regions. I take my 2 refugees from Florida, move 2 states. I move up to South Carolina. Those also have 4. And I have this 1 refugee left. Now, I can get this refugee into Missouri. I can get it into Tennessee. I can get it into Mississippi. And that's basically it. None of which does me any good here. I can get to Missouri, but there are no gears in Missouri because the region is destroyed. I can get it into Mississippi, same thing. The region is destroyed. Or I can get it into Tennessee, which for the short term is good, except that there's only 4 gears in Tennessee, Kentucky, and I've already got my 4 refugees there. So therefore, this refugee, this 1 refugee, there's nothing I can really do. For the moment, I'm going to move him up to Missouri, but that's going to be a lost refugee here in just a few minutes. The other thing I can do is I can either move my military units 1 state at a time, or some military units, like the infantry, have some special attacks. I could use the special attack this turn. I'm not going to do either of that. I'm actually going to move the military units into Wisconsin. There are dotted lines here. Normally, you're limited to bordering state movement, but these dotted lines are also considered single state movements. So I move both of those into Kentucky, or Wisconsin rather. And that is the end of the human action phase. All right, so the human action phase is finished, and we're now going to move on to the escape phase. Now, the first step, as with any phase, is to check to see if there is an event for this phase. And sure enough, our first event is an escape event. So we're going to draw the escape event card, turn it over, and it's the escape phase humanity event. Gain 1 human victory point for every refugee that rolls a fleeing result. Well, unfortunately, I don't have any refugees in states with harbors, so there will be no rolling for fleeing, and so this event card does me no good. We'll move that off to the side. The next event on top of the deck is the battle event. Because I do not have any refugees in states with harbors, there will be no rolling of fleeing results, as we talked about. And so we move right on to the next part of the escape phase, which is adding up human victory points. At this point, you gain victory points as a human player, either from refugees that do indeed escape, or at this point in the turn, the number of regions that are producing regions. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So we have 9 producing regions. That gives us 9 human victory points. We started out with 10, but remember Texas was moved to destroyed during the devastation phase. That is the end of the escape phase. If we were to reach 30, 60, or 90 victory points, or 3, 6, or 9 with the germ counter, we would then add a new cylinder to the board. We're not there yet, so we don't have to worry about that right now. Therefore, we move on down to the Martian action phase. In the Martian action phase, this is where the waves of tripods get to do their thing, and every wave gets a roll on the Martian action phase table, which again is part of the player aid card. And one of the reasons why it's a 3rd page is because there are so many states. Each state has a movement chart to roll for. And so we're going to start, and it can be very hard to keep straight which waves have and have not moved. I'm sorry, I had that marked as damaged. It's not damaged, not yet anyway. And so I'm just going to start. I try to start in areas of least clutter to most clutter. For me, it makes it easier to remember who has and has not acted during the Martian phase. And so we're going to act here in Florida. Florida is in a green region, and so that's how you check the table. On here, there is yellow, green, blue, or destroyed or red weed regions. You roll a dice, consult the chart. It'll tell you what that tripod does. So this tripod, green. In every color, whether it's red, yellow, blue, or green, a green die result means move. And so this red wave of this red tripod in Florida will move. And as you saw earlier, each state has its own movement chart based on a die roll. So for Florida, we roll, it's green. A green result in Florida means this tripod moves to sea, out into the ocean. So it moves, this is the at sea area over here. So that tripod moves to at sea. The next Martian action phase, it will roll to make land in one of the other areas of the map. So for now, that red tripod, it's done. All right, I'm actually going to move up here to Minnesota next, and I'll do the first wave counter. We are in a red destroyed region. We roll the dice, green. Every region, green means move, so we'll roll for a movement. Yellow. In Minnesota, yellow means that tripod moves to Iowa, so we'll move that tripod wave to Iowa. We'll next do the blue tripod in Minnesota. Again, even if it's a single tripod, it gets its own roll. Green, which means move. We'll roll again. Red. Minnesota red is also Iowa. So both of those waves move into Iowa. We're now done with the Midwest region. We come down now to the Southwest or Texas area. I'm going to start again with the number 2 tripod. Green is move. And yellow. For Texas, yellow means it moves to sea as well. I now have 2 waves at sea. Now I've got 4 individual tripods here in Texas, or individual waves. First one is move, green, Texas. Green move is to Arkansas. So we're in Arkansas. The next wave is green, actually a tripod, red. When you roll red in a green, red or yellow region, and yellow or red in a blue region, that's where the flying machine comes in. All right. Now, if I did not have the Tesla Tech, I would now be placing the first of up to 4 pieces of the flying machine. Remember, once you get to 4, that's it. Game's over. But because I have the Tesla Tech, I now EMP bomb. I now need to roll for that EMP bomb. A green roll, which means I have a 50-50 chance, means that piece of the flying machine is not placed. So let's roll and hope for green. It is green, so that tripod wave does not place a flying machine. Come down to the next wave. It's the yellow tripod. It's a yellow. A yellow result in a destroyed or red weed region is a little bit different than what it is in the England version. In the England version, it's just a rival, meaning that wave, this yellow one, in this instance, would have a new tripod added to it. It is indeed an arrival result in the US version of the game, so I'm adding a second tripod, but there is also another command that goes along with it, which is split. So I add this extra tripod, but then I also immediately move that tripod. It's yellow, and remember, Texas yellow is out to sea. Okay, so I'll have 3 waves out to sea. And that was again for the yellow. Now I have this last red one. Roll the dice. Green, that's move. And Texas green is Arkansas, so it moves there. All right, so that's the end of the action phase, if you will, of the Martian action phase. But we also have the victory point portion of the Martian action phase. And here's how this works. there's 3 different parts. The first thing you need to do is for each destroyed region, not redweed region, but destroyed region, you roll to see if it changes to redweed. And the difference is in how many victory points that particular region produces. You roll once for each region. A red result on the die changes that destroyed region to redweed region. So I'm rolling for Minnesota. That's green. It does not change. Go down here in Texas. That's yellow. It also does not change. Also, you look for any refugees in areas that are occupied by tripods. It does not matter if there are military forces there, only if there are refugees and tripods in the same state. In this case, I don't have any. But I also have this one refugee sitting here in a region that does not have enough gears, so that is a victory point for the Martians. So I'm going to actually give them 1 victory point right there. And then I add up victory points for the red regions. Each destroyed region is worth 2 points. Each redweed region would be worth 4 points. But I only have 2 destroyed regions, so that's 4 more points. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? That's the end of the Martian action phase. And so we'll move on to the assembly phase. The assembly phase is used when there are cylinders on the map. And remember, cylinders happen when you get the germ counter to 3, 6, or 9. There are no cylinders on the map, so therefore there is no assembly phase this turn. And so that's the end of the first turn. At the end of the first turn, we have humans with 9 victory points, Martians with 5 victory points. That's not actually very good because as time goes, the number of victory points for humans goes down in a turn, and for Martians it goes up. And so you want to be further ahead than maybe what we are. The good news is that through this first turn, because of the EMP bomb, no flying machine pieces were added to the map. And so that's the end of the first turn, and now we'll move on to turn number 2.